Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Somber Dawn Studios' Dawn Dev podcast. In this episode, we will discuss our first game, Intrusion Protocol. This is not going to be just a long ad for the game. We're going to discuss our experiences with going through our first development cycle and how we've managed to piece it all together and make it work so far. I am your host, Chad Spangler, and joining me is creative director William Chappell and I keep saying lead designer, head developer John Grady. So I'm gonna ask Grady first. This is actually going to be a bit of an interview between me and them, even though we're on the same team, because we started this whole thing in last December. My fiance and I didn't join the team until February, so a lot of the stuff was actually already done, and of course the very first steps have been taken by the time we joined as far as development goes. So why Intrusion Protocol? Intrusion Protocol, for those that don't know, is a brutally difficult retro platformer. Why is that the type of game you wanted to make first?
Well, I mean, first, I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure that it was Intrusion Protocol back in December. Um, Originally, we kind of started off. I mean, with this plan to make a Mega Man-y type platformer, primarily because I wanted to play some Mega Man, and well, I didn't have any Mega Man to play. But we kind of quickly found out that the jumping mechanics and everything that I had written in were more fun than the shooting and more fun than killing things. And it was just fun to dodge stuff and jump around, and that kind of put the development into one direction away from what I had originally intended. And then when we created a debugging tool to let us kind of follow the jump paths to figure out how they were working and why they were feeling so good, and where people were dying and things, that really is what settled it, because this little debugging tail we had made for the player just had a almost hypnotic effect. And so we really decided, okay, well, we're going to keep that and we're going to make it pretty. And okay, we're now a game about a little ball that jumps around through really, really hard jumps and dodges things and doesn't get crushed. And there is no shooting or bosses. There's just don't get hit and be quick and be careful.
Gotcha.
And I think too, we had started to come to a conclusion for the theming of the game, because we hadn't specific art style or theme initially.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask you about.
We completely rewrote or redrew, I guess, a lot of our art assets, because we had this idea of basically being a hacker, or like a Tron, because that's the thing with the tail, is it kind of had this Tron light cycle type feel to it to me. And so we had the idea to instead become like a little computer virus, hacking into a computer all Tron style. And so that kind of like led to a lot of our theming and the name of the game and stuff. And we tried to distill it down to what was best. And that's what we ended up with, was Intrusion Protocol.
Awesome. I know from a marketing standpoint, it's in some ways an easy sell, in some ways a hard sell, this game, because there's a million platformers out there. It's a hard to show people that it's fun, but with the art style, with all the cool stuff that's going on in the game, it also makes it kind of easier. It's cool to show off that tail that you were talking about, and we actually made a custom tail that we're giving away to Twitch streamers. If anybody wants to get on that, just message us. That you can only get through Twitch streamers. And everybody has really liked the aesthetics, especially at live events so far. That's we try at live events to get people to be very critical of the game. Tell us what you don't like about it. We want to know what we want to fix. And a lot of people, you can tell that they didn't like this or that or something, but they liked the game overall, so they said, "Oh no problems, like I really like it." And that's that is a good thing. Like it's not great that we're not getting a lot of feedback from those people, but it is great that overall they liked it enough to where they didn't say, it's just a game, it's just a platform or whatever. So
I do want to swing
go
in
for it.
here real quick because we've talked about the aesthetic. I think it's a good chance to talk about one of the pitfalls of making Intrusion Protocol.
Yes.
So we have these tiles, which are circuit boards, basically. And we thought it would be cool and look interesting to have energy pulse through them. Well, for sizing reasons and a few other things, we had to create a synchronized animation system, which resulted in it taking longer to tile levels than it did to design them.
Longer is an understatement.
Yeah, no, it's like 2 to 3 times as long. Like just absolutely the bulk of the work. And that just to set up that synchronization system was about 10,000 mouse clicks in Game Maker Studio, which was insane. My wife actually did a fair bit of it because I think she looked over at one point and realized I was about ready to throw the computer if I had to click a mouse. But yeah, it definitely a good lesson learned from the game is having every single tile in your game have to synchronize with each other is a bad idea. It will take you a very, very long time.
And I know that we kind of talked a little bit about trying to make that easier in some way to try and automate that. We ultimately the solution we came up with was kind of a half measure that we did stamps to where. Did you actually end up using those stamps at all?
I used the crap out of those stamps.
Had we not come up with if we had not found the brushes in Game Maker Studio, which allowed us to do that stamping process, I don't know that we could have finished the game. The 10th level specifically is so long and so geometrically complicated that it would have taken months to tile that thing.
The stamps that we used, which Grady and I had sort of a meeting about it, sort of hashed it out. Basically, since we had to synchronize the tile, we came up with prefabricated stamp sets that you, instead of doing every single tile individually, you could simply just pick a stamp that had several tiles in a row already synchronized and put it there. And I guess that did help a lot. I was wondering, I don't think we ever followed up with each other on how that actually helped. How much? It
decreased some of the artistic elements in the levels, in how we laid out some of the circuitry, because we were laying down 8 at a time. But it did allow us to finish the game. It allowed us to lay down 8 tiles at a time instead of 1 at a time, and it allowed us to not lose our synchronization place as often as we did when we were having to move tile by tile.
Gotcha. Okay, I want to move on to talking a little bit about the process, like the whole development process of Intrusion Call and release. Initially, when we were developing this, the plan was to go through Steam Greenlight. There was news, around the time that I joined that, it was coming to an end. Steam Direct was coming, but, we assumed we're working on Valve time. That could take forever and probably will take forever. So we went under the assumption that we were going to go through Greenlight and hopefully get on Steam that way. So we did. We started the Greenlight campaign, and not as successful as we wanted it to be. We definitely that's a point where we learned some lessons, especially me, because initially I had uploaded the branding image, that the first thing they saw, and it just wasn't bright. And I think William pointed that out to me, it just didn't stand out at all. It's very dark. It probably cost us a crap load of clicks on the recent page.
It was dark and it was static.
Yeah, it wasn't animated either. So we fixed that. And promoting our Greenlight was, we learned a lot from it. I did, especially as the marketing person, but man, it was a struggle. And I actually wrote a blog post about Direct replacing Greenlight when it happened, which was out of the blue. We all of a sudden we're like, guys, Greenlight's over and we're still on it. What's going on? So Direct came, Greenlight ended with pretty much no notice from Valve. Thanks a lot, guys. But And ultimately, it was a good thing because I wrote an article about this that got syndicated by GamesBeat, actually. That it's better, and I still hold this, even though there's a crap load of Steam games that people have put up since Direct came out. I still hold that it's better to be on the market flooded with a bunch of crap games than trying to struggle to get to the market at all. Which was where we were at. We had this game which was honestly better than a lot of Greenlight games that we saw, because a lot of Greenlight games we saw were just terrible. And like everybody has that experience. They'll go on Greenlight and just like wade through a bunch of crap. It's like, what the hell is this? How did you even get this to a point? But those games, a lot of the times, had more votes than us. And we were like, man, that's crazy.
And something I'd like to say, I mean, part of the Greenlight system was really pay for vote stuff going on. And
right
now, I know there's a lot of complaints at the moment that a ton of games are coming in through Direct. But here's the thing. I don't want to talk too much about how much money Protocol has made, but you're seeing the initial flood of games that low quality producers, asset flippers, card farmers and stuff who've turned to achievement farming now were able to release. And some of them may be making their money back, but a lot of them probably aren't. That $100 per game fee, they may be making their money back, but maybe not to make it worth doing again and again and again. They may not be making really any profit.
Yeah.
And the achievement spam people, I mean, I have to just have faith that Valve's going to crack down on that. That's really simple. There's no reason for a game to have 10,000 achievements. There surely will enact some kind of numeric cap how many achievements you can have, with plus some number for DLC soon, I would think, to shut these people down.
And you talked about that fee, and that was an important part of, transitioning from Greenlight to Direct, because we kept wondering, like, Valve didn't announce the fee until Direct was pretty much here, like pretty much live. And we were so worried because the initial number, for those that don't know, was they had said when they announced Direct that you could put your game on Steam for a fee of anywhere from $100 to $5,000. And we're like, well, we can definitely do one of those numbers. But the other one would give us, no chance. And a lot of indie developers, absolutely no chance. So we were really worried about that. So when they actually came out and announced the fee was going to be $100 and you'd be able to do that in a week, we were actually pretty excited. We're like, oh, sweet. We don't have to do this Greenlight nonsense anymore. Like we don't have to compete with these, guys that are just literally paying for votes. We don't have to fail at taking the high road anymore. Like we can just be on Steam and push our game from there. And just kind of pushing through the development process that we did that. We got on Steam, and since then we've been in kind of post-release mode, doing the socials, doing everything like that. Entire cycle from going from very beginning of the project to release was December 2016 to July 20th, was our release day. So that's, that was our first game, and it took less than a year. And we didn't want to get stuck in a cycle that so many game developers get stuck in, where they work on this project, they work on that project, they abandon this one, they abandon that one, and never release a damn thing. We've heard that horror story online, in person, all the time, and we're like, no, we can't do that. Like, if we want this to be more than a hobby, if we want to turn this into a career, it doesn't have to be the most perfect game in the world, but we have to release something. And we did that,
Yeah, I think we did a pretty good. A lot of people, a lot of Twitch streamers and stuff who have played our game, the consistent comment is, yeah, it's not as pretty as Super Meat Boy. It's a little rough around the edges in a few places, but it's your first game and you made it in 6 months. That's pretty impressive. And I'm pretty happy with what we ended up making. Would I have liked to go on it longer and more levels and stuff? Sure, we may still have a chance to do that if we have some more sales out of it. But
Mhm.
we learned so much with the first game as I've been prototypes for game 2. And just as I've gone through and done some patching for Intrusion Protocol, it's the entire process is so much easier and we know so much more. It's, I have a background in kind of business software, and it's just such a different mindset from writing business software to writing games.
Right. And like the goal of the entire game in my mind from the get-go was release a good game. And that was it. I didn't have anything more specific as far as goals for me went. It was just release a good game because that's what we wanted to do for our first game. Very much a let's learn our lessons now and not, have to spend like a crap load of time on this brilliantly thought out, brilliant planned game only to be like, what the hell are we doing when we go to sell it? So, Will, I want to ask you about, as the creative director, kind of about the voice of the game, because it very much evolved over time, right? Like, we didn't, when I joined, when Paige and I joined, it wasn't initially oh, this game is gonna kick your ass. Like, it's brutally, you're gonna die a lot. Like, and that's something we kind of developed throughout the release process was the voice of the game, and something that could have been more coherent from the get-go and something that we've definitely learned a lot about. So, Will, could you tell us a little bit about just the overall voice of the game?
I think part of that is we didn't have a consistent idea of what voice to be the entire time. We knew we wanted something to play tight and to be fun to play. And I think early off we had this idea to be more casual than what we ended up being. And we had a lot more stuff, just in general features that we were going to cram into the game just because we thought, oh, well, it needs this, it needs that. And over time, we just realized that it's the execution, actually playing it, and kind of the skill you develop. And we developed a lot of skill over time, just from playing it to test our own game, that it became very hard for us to judge the difficulty of something. Of a particular level, so it became more of well, if we can beat it and we've played it a lot, then it's at least beatable. It might be hard, and then it became this, almost, I don't want to say antagonistic, but like intentionally putting a challenge forth, like, you think you can actually handle this? So it seems more like that kind of cocky difficulty that developed over time was just kind of a result of how well we were getting at the game just from playing it to test it.
Right. And that kind of leads into what I want to talk about next. Watching people play the game and what they get out of it. Like when watching people play this game, this is an important thing for game dev too, is you have to let people, in my opinion, play your game earlier than you would like them to. Because you can start developing all this and be like, oh, it's not ready yet, it's not perfect, this isn't perfect, and then have people play it and somebody could be like, well, I hate this thing that you spent all of your time doing. Like, you have to, I think it's important to get continuous feedback. Like, obviously, if you have a game that just doesn't even work, like, maybe not show that to people. But, if you have a functional thing, I think it's important to start at least getting, friends or, people local to try as soon as you can to get feedback to determine what you need to work on. Because, like, you can get in your own head so much about what you think the game needs, and you may be completely off base from what players actually want. And that's kind of what I want to talk about next, is like, what have we learned about our own game from watching other people play? Grady?
Well, first, real quick, I want to comment on that first bit, which is, if you're scared to show your game to friends, family, or the public, anyone in general, one of two things is going on. Either A, you've got some imposter syndrome, you're not quite sure if it's good enough, and we had some of this with our first game, where it's like, are we really ready to do this? Is this really a thing? Are we really making a game? And that seems to consistently happen to, like, everyone. Or B, there's something wrong with the game, and you're kind of not to admit it. I've seen a fair number of people discuss where they have a game and it's just not ready to show off and not ready to show off, and it's because they kind of are realizing it's a game that maybe doesn't have legs and are too invested in it to do that. In both those situations, you just need to show it to people, because if it's imposter syndrome, showing it to people will help with your confidence. And if the game doesn't have legs, showing it to people is going to make you face up to that real fast.
What was the question again?
What? No, that was beautiful. That was fantastic way of putting that. But what have you learned about Intrusion Protocol that you didn't know otherwise by watching other people play it?
Noticed, that I didn't realize before we started showing off to people is a lot of things that seemed really intrinsic to us. It made sense to jump in this place, to go to the thing, to land on this platform or whatever. A lot of people haven't got a clue. And,
Yeah.
Communicating certain things, like originally we didn't have physical checkpoints for people that they could see, and that was really disorienting. It wasn't clear to us because we knew where the checkpoints were because we put them there.
Yeah.
But to other people, it was extremely disorienting. And so kind of that communicating information to people who have no idea what they're doing when they play it is something I really noticed.
At one point, we did what we call the readability pass, where we took all of our feedback on people complaining about, I don't understand this, I don't understand that, what just happened here. And we went through and tried to give visual or audio or both cues to all these things. When we presented our build after that, the complaints nearly stopped. There were a few people who still had a problem here, but the number of people who had something to complain about in the game plummeted, because all of a sudden they could see, well, okay, gravity reverses here, but there's this particle effect and this sound effect, and there's a checkpoint here with an arrow on it saying, should I go left or right from this spot to go further in the level? All these things that really helped players understand what they were doing.
Right. And that kind of ties into what we were both saying earlier, is like, if we would have never known that otherwise, like if we didn't show Intrusion Protocol relatively early, like we could have, oh God, we would have been working, you especially would have been working on so much stuff that may not even have mattered to players, like, and we kind of were able to improve our own feedback by doing that, in that, we, like the first time we went to the live demo, first Friday, St. Louis Science Center, fantastic. Like we loved doing it, but we got a lot of the same complaints over and over and over and over. So when you eliminate those complaints, the level of quality feedback just shoots up, because people are focused on, not those complaints and giving you more in-depth things,
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that is one very solid point, is we did start to hear some things and some suggestions after that point that we hadn't heard before. And I think it was just because they were drowned out by these problems that we had fixed.
Mm-hmm. So now what I keep, a common question I get in Twitch chats is, what are you doing with the game now? And from my point of view, I'm the marketing guy right now. I feel like the ball is kind of in my court to, do stuff to make people aware of this game, where you can go get it. It's on Steam for $4.99, by the way. So, what you guys aren't currently doing anything. We're kind of you guys are kind of focusing more on the next project, I feel, and kind of, always continuously learning new lessons just in general. But what? Let's have a scenario where the live stream I'm doing on the 20th, which I'll put details of that in the description. Write that down right now. Say that makes the game go huge. What would you? And we'll start with Will. What would you want to do, just hypothetically, if Intrusion Protocol just blew up? Like, would we want to do something else with it, or do you think we're just done with it no matter what?
I think it definitely has a lot of potential. and it's kind of set up in the story. Don't want to give any spoilers.
Yeah.
To have extra content that's been added, like a level pack, and we actually had from a Twitch streamer or a comment in a Twitch stream about like Intrusion Protocol digging deeper, or something like that. But it's anyway. The point is that we could make a lot more levels, and at this point, since the base game is out, we could really go nuts with some of these levels. It could be really big and hard, and just really awesome, in my opinion. And so we could add extra content for the game, like DLC. I don't really know how much more we could go back and do polish without effectively redoing the entire visual theme of the game. But maybe like a different tile set on the new levels and stuff to make things seem more interesting, a little bit more varied.
Yeah, I mean, definitely there is a lot of stuff that we've seen in Twitch streams that are kind of going to go into a rather large patch at some point in the future.
Right.
We released a few hot fixes when the game first came out that just needed to be done quickly.
Which I was impressed with how few there were.
But there are a few things I'm trying to get into a larger patch at some point, including possibly a Linux version. We've not really delved too much into that process, and we're kind of looking at getting that done. But beyond just kind of some quality of life fixes and a couple bug fixes and maybe a Linux version, everything else really is kind of dependent on revenue. I mean, I would love to do another 10 levels of Intrusion Protocol, but that's a lot of work, and it really, unfortunately, has to be justified by sales numbers at some point to put somebody on doing that much work for that long.
Right. And I feel like that kind of touches on, what Intrusion Protocol was to our history as a studio. Is, whatever word you want to use, is you have to know as a studio, when to move forward. Because, like I said, obviously I'm the marketing guy. That's what I have to market right now. I'm still marketing Intrusion Protocol. I'm very proud of Intrusion Protocol. But, we're having a meeting later about our next game already. As if we're going to do this professionally as a studio, we can't make one game, ride that out for a while, and then decide when to make our next game. Like, we have to be proactive. And we learned a lot of lessons from Intrusion Protocol, like just a stupid amount of lessons. That kind of ties in with our first episode of our first podcast, or the theme of our first podcast is just do it. We learned more doing Intrusion Protocol, making it, marketing it, all that, than we did researching it and learning how to do it,
Yeah, and I think too the amount of lessons that really integrating it in with Steam and the marketing, the launch, post-launch, all that stuff. Those are lessons that are going to be useful for every game we release from here on out.
Right.
And so I think we kind of fumbled the launch a little bit. It released later than we expected. We didn't fully understand what day we could launch because of the changes to Steam Direct, and so I think we fumbled our launch a little bit, and we paid for it, I guess you could say.
Right.
But going forward, though, we have a much better idea of exactly how to launch the game for the greatest effect.
Right.
And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you don't think about. You don't even know you don't know.
Right.
You actually release a product. It was probably half a month after release before anybody was like, hey, there's no box art for your game on Twitch, and there's stuff you can do to get your game's box art on Twitch and to get your game in Twitch's database, and you should do that. And so, like, that's the kind of stuff that you just don't realize you need to do until you've released a game and done it. And now when we release game 2, whenever that is, it's going to have that kind of stuff on a checklist and done 2 weeks before the game comes out.
Right. Yeah, I feel like Intrusion Protocol, it blows my mind. Like, the more we talk about it, the more I realize how much we've actually learned for it. Will was talking about how we kind of fumbled the release, and I agree with that. But even then, the actual release was an iteration of our green light, because we fumbled harder on the green light in my opinion. We fumbled harder on starting the green light than we fumbled on actually releasing the game. So, we learned our lessons with the green light launch. And when we, green light ended and we just went to release to direct, we had a much better idea of, how we needed to launch and what we needed to do. So I feel like that green light experience helped us a lot with Intrusion Protocol, similar to how Intrusion Protocol is going to help us, learn with next games. So, all right, I think that's going to wrap up this episode. Intrusion Protocol, the game we've been talking about this whole time, is our very first game from Somber Dawn Studios. It is currently available on Steam for $4.99. You can follow our socials on Twitter. We will be announcing when Twitch streamers will be streaming it and giving away exclusive Twitch tales for the game that you can only get through Twitch streamers. You can't buy them or anything like that. So follow us on Twitter if you want to blast when those are happening. See if you can win that tale. I'll probably be giving away that tale on the live stream I'm doing on the Mike and Gary channel, which I will have in the comments. That is upcoming. It'll be on September 20th, and that is a Can This Game Dev Beat His Own Game live stream because I have not beaten Intrusion Protocol yet. Fun fact. So if you want to watch me fail a whole lot at my own game, hopefully get through it and give away some keys and whatnot, hit up the description for that. That'll be on the Mike and Gary YouTube channel. So final thoughts about what is Intrusion Protocol, Grady?
Intrusion Protocol, I think final thought for the studio, it was a great learning experience. I really learned a lot. And for anybody who wants to buy it or play it, it's our challenge to you. Can you beat this game? Because I promise you, if you do, the only way I can think back to the way I've seen people react to beating level 10 is my old vanilla World of Warcraft days when you would go after a raid boss for 2 months and then you finally killed him and everybody went nuts. I've seen people shake their desks when they finally beat our game.
Oh, yeah. William?
Yeah, to me, this is just the lessons that we've game are there's nothing that could possibly replace them, except maybe lessons for our next game. But yeah, and just actually being able to resurrect our dreams and complete something like this it's almost something. If it's a feeling that's greater than yourself, even if not everybody likes it, or even if it's not as good as what I'm going to make next time. But still, it's the sense of accomplishment and the lessons learned. There's nothing that can describe it.
I agree. That's a very good way to put it. All right, that concludes episode 2 of the Dawn Dev podcast. I am Chad Spangler, joined by John Grady and William Chappell, and we will see you next time.